I'm Kristi Zappie-Ferradino, Program Director at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and I have the good fortune of moderating this panel where we're going to talk about the importance of building public and private partnerships. And I think that's so key, especially considering our last panel and talking about the why. And the way that we get there is through public and private partnerships. So I'm thrilled to introduce to you our panel this afternoon. We have Tyler Thomas, Deputy Director, Connect Louisiana. How do you say it?
Thomas Tyler.
Thomas Tyler.
It happens all the time.
I'm sure.
But yes, it's Connect Louisiana, Louisiana Office of Broadband.
Excellent. And we also have Solomon Graves, Director of Public Policy, Heartland Forward.
It's actually Graves, Solomon.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
We have Clark Bruce Clark, the Executive Director of the Center for Digital Equity, Charlotte. So as you can see, we have a very esteemed panel with us today. So the focus of our conversation this afternoon, with so much public funding available, how can local organizations work with their states and beyond to help secure public funding and private funding on all levels? This is in addition to the funding that is through ISPs. So in our conversation today, we're going to explore public and private funding as well as public-private partnerships that digital inclusion organizations can take advantage of. So what I'd like to do for this moment is for you each to tell us about your organization for a moment, and then give us an example of a partnership that you're working on. Just one example, because we'll have more time this afternoon to talk about that.
Gotcha.
So Thomas.
So as a state broadband office, we're tasked with really kind of outlining the plans that we as a state need to have for not only digital equity funding coming from the federal government, but also for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. So Louisiana, I think we received the 8th largest allocation of BEAD funds at $1.355 billion. And from our perspective, we can use a lot of that money, not only for deployment uses, but also for what they call non-deployment uses. It'll be a key thing that we look at as we start to come up with the different partnerships that we need to establish with other statewide nonprofits or statewide organizations or local organizations or even national organizations to come up with plans to really close that digital divide, not only from an access perspective, but also from a digital equity and a digital inclusion perspective. So I think that's one of the key things that we're excited about as an office is designing what those plans look like, and with feedback from all sorts of stakeholders throughout our state, from small towns to big national nonprofits to everyone similar to Solomon and Heartland. Having everyone at the table to say this is what's important is key for us. We haven't done any digital equity grants yet, so really the partnerships that we have focused on lately is really improving the access through our state. So we ran a grant program last year. We have by far the best state named grant program. It's the Gumbo Grant Program. Drew here has covered it extensively, but it's the Granting Unserved Municipalities Broadband Opportunities Program. And so we ran a grant program to with Capital Projects Fund dollars to go out and build across our state. And those projects are ongoing and they're happening now, and we're really excited about that. So we're continuing to close that access gap. And a variety of different players from national providers like AT&T or Comcast participated and got funding for this, to smaller providers like Cajun Broadband, who we gave a lot of money to build out in the South Central Louisiana region. So it's key that we have those partnerships in place with our local, regional, and national internet service providers to go through and finish connecting everybody once and for all. I will say that we are working on digital equity grants, a grant program. We can't just have some easy acronym for that. So we came up with the A2FA grant program. That is enhancing technology outcomes to unify and foster full equity for everyone.
Perfect.
So that'll be our digital equity program, next year when we start to go through and decide what we want to do for grants with that. So I think I've been speaking too much. So yes, let's continue down the line.
Excellent.
Talk to everybody.
Again, I'm Solomon Gers, Director of Public Policy for Heartland Ford. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit styling ourselves as a think and do tank focused on economic renewal and economic opportunity in America's middle. If you start at North Dakota and draw a line down to Texas and over to Alabama and up to Michigan and Ohio, the 20 states inside that rectangle are where we focus our programming and focus our research, the do and the think side of the house. Our work falls into 4 buckets: entrepreneurship, workforce development, health and wellness, and then a catch-all pillar we call regional competitiveness. And that regional competitiveness work is where our high-speed internet work lives, which in addition to leading our public policy and advocacy portfolio, I also serve as program director for our regional competitiveness work. And for us, regional competitiveness is when we think about those things that the Heartland needs to do to maintain its position as a national leader. And that is antithetical to some who simply view the middle of the country as the flyover states. But when you take those 20 states unto themselves, they're the 3rd largest GDP on earth after the rest of the United States and this little country in Asia called China. So we have value in the middle of the country. So when you look at that value, when you look at what do the Heartland need to focus on to maintain that value, right now it is universal connectivity. It is that foundational economic development issue of our time that when you think of every other issue that every governor, every mayor, every county commissioner, every school superintendent, every hospital executive, everybody who has any sense needs to be thinking about to grow whatever issue they care about in the 21st century, it's high-speed internet. So that's why a Think and Do Tank cares about high-speed internet. So what's one thing we're doing in this space? In 2021, when we launched our Connecting the Heartland to High-Speed Internet initiative, which right now is focused in 5 states in a swath of the Heartland, we launched the Arkansas Connectivity Coalition, which is a group of 15 or so community groups in Arkansas that are not in unto themselves focused on high-speed internet. They care about the people that are impacted by a lack of universal connectivity. We have worked to leverage the capacity of these 15 plus organizations in a myriad of ways. Most recently, through an engagement we have with the Arkansas State Broadband Office to draft the state's Arkansas Digital Skills and Opportunity Plan, which is Arkansas's iteration of the state's digital equity plan. And I'll talk a little bit later about why we call it the Arkansas Digital Skills and Opportunity Plan, because we also like acronyms in Arkansas. We call it the DISCO Plan, not as crafty as our neighbors to the south, but we have a little bit of jazz up north. But we have a belief that in order to effectively not just engage the state around this concept of digital equity, but to sustain a culture of digital equity, you have to leverage community capacity. And we've done that both during the survey portion of that project. Now as we pivot into the public comment period, we'll also be leveraging the capacity of the Connectivity Coalition. We were successful in the survey round. In a state of 3 million Arkansans, we had almost 13,000 survey respondents. Those of y'all who are engaged in this work know it is extremely hard to get 13,000 individuals to respond to a digital equity survey. So we're extremely excited about the level of engagement and level of interest that we continue to see through the work of the Connectivity Coalition and their interest in this work.
Thank you, Solomon. Bruce.
It's hard to be an active listener and be ready to talk at the same time, so I appreciate learning from both of you. The first thing that comes to my mind is that last paragraph of the definition of digital inclusion, and that really is centering my answer here, that digital equity must advance as technology advances. And for us in Charlotte and in North Carolina, we're really thinking about the ecosystem that we're building, right? This isn't about solving for today. I think we're talking about continuing ACP and the role of digital navigators, but to me, the ultimate objective, and I think you just hit it perfectly, the culture that we create around digital equity. So I have the pleasure of serving as the executive director for the Center for Digital Equity at Queen's University of Charlotte. We are a backbone organization for a collective impact strategy focused on making Mecklenburg County the most digitally equitable community in America. We bring together residents, public and private sector partners across 5 focus areas to co-create solutions to achieve that audacious mission. Second part of your question, what's one partnership that I would share? I think situating digital equity work at the intersection of digital and racial equity is something that we as a community of practitioners can never forget. The reason we are here in the first place and the reason we have an opportunity in front of us in this point in our life, being on earth at this moment, is to help solve these really challenging opportunities using the positive language. Our mayor went to our corporate community a few years ago and she said, in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, she said, what are you going to do about it, basically? How are you going to respond to racial equity issues that are ripping our communities apart? And just like all good corporate communities, they had a convening and got a plan and a whiteboard, and thanks to some partners at Ernst & Young, convened our private sector community and identified 4 areas that they wanted to address, one of which happened to be digital equity. So over the next couple of years, the private sector community, working with the center, developed a plan to invest $58 million in our community. Some of that's public sector funding, that is many of the funds that we've talked about, and about 20 million of that is straight private sector investment in the work. And so I'll probably have a chance in some of the questions to expound upon that, but that alone has been one of the most significant changes in our community, allowed us to staff up and begin to build that ecosystem that was once a unfunded coalition of the willing, that might resonate with some of you, and is now backed by the resources that are putting us in the position to take these federal funds that are coming in now and put them to their highest and best use.
Thank you. And I can really attest to the great work that the Center for Digital Equity is doing within the city as someone who is in Charlotte, or Charlotte adjacent rather, but close enough. Excellent. So you talked a little bit about this, why this matters, but I'm going to direct it to you, Solomon. Why is it important to even pursue these types of partnerships and collaborations? And at Heartland Forward, you talked about 4 bucket areas: workforce development, entrepreneurship, the catch-all, and then regional competitiveness. So if you had to hone in on one of those and how it intersects with digital inclusion, what's the one area that really you need to focus on at Heartland Forward?
So I would say that catch-all bucket, that regional competitiveness piece. Again, we were created in 2019 as a offshoot of our Heartland Summit, which was created in 2018 by our founders who wanted to change the narrative of the middle of the country. And again, they wanted the Heartland to be viewed as more than just the flyover states. We have to understand that for us to sustain the vitality of today and to position ourselves for the opportunities of tomorrow, we have to connect every community. We cannot afford to throw away zip codes. Mm-hmm. And
that's a quote. I want to pause there. We cannot afford to throw away zip codes.
And we've got
Let's just let that sink in for a moment, because if you were in that zip code.
And that's what we've been doing.
Solomon.
Let's just be very honest. And I'm relatively new to the nonprofit space. I like to think I'm young-ish, but I had a 20-year career in state government, and economic development is a creature of ease in that it goes where the easy opportunities are. It goes where it's easiest to close the deals. Deployment projects are also, they tend to follow where the easiest projects are. And what has happened is we have these pockets where we have built up over time, and every community, we know where those are. And what has happened is we now have left communities behind, and we now have to catch those communities up. And that is the value of this not once in a generation, but once in a lifetime investment around digital equity specifically, is to catch communities up and to ensure that those who have been left behind, and while oftentimes those that are left behind, there is a racial element, it's not always a racial issue. Oftentimes it's black, brown, and everything in between. And I talk about it oftentimes in Arkansas. Those that live in the Ozark Mountains that don't look anything like me have the same experiences that live in the Delta country that look exactly like me. And Delta and digital equity is going to solve the challenges for those in the Delta, the same in the Ozark Mountains. And that's what Heartland Forward is working toward when we talk about ensuring regional competitiveness. So when industry is citing the jobs of the future, and we truly believe that the Heartland is uniquely positioned for those jobs of the future because of our low cost of living and generally speaking, competitive economic environment, high quality of life in many communities throughout the Heartland, uniquely positioned to pursue the jobs of tomorrow and take advantage of what we believe is a talent pipeline that is second to none. For us to do that, we have to make sure that every community is connected. Every community has those skills necessary to take advantage of this infrastructure. And it's not that we're just running fiber to their front door and they have a resource that they don't know what the first thing to do with it is.
Thank you. Excellent. So Bruce, the next question is for you. Can you talk about a successful partnership between your organization and state government, so the state of North Carolina, that resulted in improved broadband initiatives?
So we have a couple of projects, actually one happening today, and I had to come here instead of there, so it's going on right now, and maybe I'll get a text to give us some live updates. But we've been thinking about how do we apply our digital navigator model in the health context, not just healthcare, but health at large. And so we're collaborating with the Department of Adult and Aging Services, which is in the Department of Health and Human Services, focused on building out a statewide digital health navigator model, which would be within the digital navigator models as we've heard them described today, but with a very specific expertise in health, the health world. So we have a co-creation process that we run. I think as we've heard a few times today, centering this work in community and listening to what residents and our partners are telling us to do is really critical to building sustaining programs. And so today we're convening folks from across the state to begin to develop that further. We hope to deploy that over the next 12 months. And that's one of many. I would also just give props. I know there's a lot of other state folks here today and some other events happening, but we are very fortunate to have the first Office of Digital Equity in the country, which is a good deal. We'll take a clap for that. Thanks to our governor and the staff for doing that work and for really leading. And we've been convening digital equity practitioners in North Carolina for 4 or 5 years now. In fact, some of those folks are now working at NDIA. So yeah, I think the state is a key partner in this work, as has been highlighted today. I don't really have anything else to add.
Excellent, thank you. So Thomas, coming from a state broadband office, can you speak more about what's going on in your state and how the state is supporting broadband initiatives throughout Louisiana?
Yeah, sure. From our office's perspective, we're we call ourselves a relatively young office, but We've been doing it about 2.5 years now, and 2.5, almost coming up on 3 years in March. And there's a lot of things that that have happened in our state that just left a lot of people behind. I think we ran some numbers. It's like 1.7 million Louisianians are affected by this, whether it's that they don't have access, they can't afford it, or maybe they don't even have the device or skills to get online. There's a lot of people out there that we have to help. So I mean, that's 1.7 million out of like about 4.5 million that live in our state. So it's key for us that we put tools and we have programs in place that can start to help people. That being said, everybody that falls into that bucket needed this yesterday. And to Solomon's point, you can take someone from Northeast Louisiana and Southwest Louisiana who have different archetypes, different lives, and they can agree on the fact that their internet is awful, okay? And that just speaks to the need that we see in Louisiana. So we have come in with two key mindsets when we look at how an office operates. We move with a sense of urgency because, again, these people needed this yesterday. And we over-communicate to people because it's not enough to tell stakeholders once or twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times. You have to continue to offer communication to everybody so that they understand the goals of what the state has and how they can assist, whether it's an internet service provider, whether it's a local nonprofit, whether it's local municipalities or whoever. It's about getting the right people at the table to participate and offer value on what we're working on. So I think that's key reasons why we're pushing as forward and as fast as we can in Louisiana is that we want to ensure that we are improving the lives and outcomes of our residents. And the main way that we can start to do that is by just giving them that tool, giving them the internet access that they have so desperately needed for so long.
Can I go off script real quick?
Please.
Something Thomas and Bruce talked about amplifying the work that the states are doing. When we talk about nationally 40 plus million and underserved individuals, this is too much for the public sector in and of itself to address. There are very few things in government where government has come into the problem with the mindset of how can we bring more people into the solution. We cannot lose sight of this moment.
Agreed.
We cannot lose sight of this moment that we have decision makers at the state level, at the federal level. I think we need more, but we have decision makers at the state and federal level who are coming into these conversations understanding to varying degrees that we've got to over communicate and we've got to engage at various levels and start new enterprises and start new structures in order to facilitate new partnerships in order to begin solving this problem that we are not going to be able to solve as a government entity unto ourselves.
And if you don't mind, I think it speaks to the need of support from all of the different stakeholders within states or within regions or what have you, because when you think about it, there's $40+ billion that's going to the states. There's probably 150 to 200 state broadband leaders within these state offices, okay? We run a pretty lean shop, so there's 3 of us in our office. But there's some states that have 10. There's some states that have, maybe even up to 40 people that are dealing with this. But the problem is that, we need the rock stars in our state or in our region to tell us what they've been working on and how they feel that they could participate or what role they could serve if they were given a grant for something or if they had the opportunity to build their program from the small town that it's in to a more regional or statewide setting. So having people that we can rely on as a state office and say, okay, we know that this person knows about telehealth, or we know that we can trust this person to go and execute on workforce. Those are key things. And that's what every state is going to be looking for, because you essentially have 56 public startups here that are just trying there's so many plates to keep twirling. You have no idea. I mean, from doing the local stakeholder engagement and waking up at 4 a.m. to drive to North Louisiana, to trying to answer questions or comments from our federal partners on the plans that we're trying to get approved. There's so many things you have to keep track of and work on. So it's hugely important that all the states have the support they need from their local, their regional partners that they can dedicate and they know they can trust, and they can say, okay, you go and you continue what you're doing, and let's continue to move the needle forward on that.
And that goes to the importance of the digital ecosystem, digital inclusion ecosystem within communities. So we're going to take a few questions in a moment, but I really want to get to some support for everyone listening and for those in the audience about funding. And I'm going to try to get an answer from both Bruce and Solomon. So Solomon, as digital inclusion practitioners try to go after private funding, what are some barriers that they're facing that you can help them mitigate? And I'm going to preface to say, since we're short on time, brevity is king.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you from a perspective from either federal funding, state funding, or private.
Message, knowing your audience. And I teed this up, in my talk about what we're doing for Arkansas. It shouldn't be a surprise to many. We can't say digital equity in Arkansas. We say digital skills and opportunity. It's the same thing, but words matter. Know your audience. We had an event last week called the Heartland Summit, and our keynote speaker was Matthew McConaughey. He's doing some really transformative work around amplifying the value of school safety funding and connecting school districts to the availability of that funding. And he made a comment where he said that the money out there for school safety isn't red money or blue money, is green money. And I left that room saying, I'm going to steal that for the next 3 to 5 years. Every time I talk about broadband and high-speed internet and BEAD and digital equity and everything else, because it's true. Know your audience. Words matter. This is not red money or blue money. This is green money, and this is green money that is going to transform your communities. So if you have to use a word you wouldn't ordinarily use to better your community, better your community.
Thank you. So Bruce, what are some tips for people going after funding as a digital inclusion program?
In my experience, we've found some real value, especially in the world today, that there's a connection to meaning that a lot of these companies, and particularly their employees, are looking for. They're sort of done with the, let's go fill some backpacks and call it a day. They're looking for meaningful experiences to contribute and to take the skills that they bring to work every day and pour them into the communities that they live. And so we've found ways in partnership with Ernst & Young and Barings and Ally, and I'm name dropping here, but we've got a lot of those companies in our community. I understand that's different in urban and rural, where we've not just gone and asked them for their money, but we've also asked them for their time and their talent. And so they're doing things like helping us build out a journey map for residents to go through a digital navigator experience and then digitize that and try to bring that to market. Or we're using EY for a number of different things. They're one of our best partners around marketing and thinking about the ways that they have market research that they pay for that they've made available to us. Now they're also giving us the money. We definitely like to start with that as well. But the combination of the two is really critical. And sometimes one begets the other, especially when you get their staff involved and you get their teams involved and they're coming out and experiencing this work differently than sitting behind their desk, but they're actually in the community serving as a digital navigator. We can take corporate volunteers, 15 minutes of training, and we've done this dozens and dozens of times, and put them helping sign up residents for the Affordable Connectivity Program, where you put one trained digital navigator with 4 or 5 corporate volunteers, and now you've expanded your capacity. So that would be my suggestion, is just think about other ways that the companies and their teams can bring value to the work that you do.
This has been great. Thank you. My question's actually for Thomas. Some of the data we looked at shows the ACP numbers highest in Louisiana.
Right.
I'm just curious as to what you attribute that to and what you did to help with ACP enrollment writ large.
It's been a lot of really public outreach. I mean, but I think our providers are key because they publicize it. We partnered with Education Superhighway recently this year to do an ACP subscriber campaign to really boost the numbers as well. But I think really it speaks to the need across our state. You know, back in July, we came and met with every member of our congressional delegation to continue to reiterate why it's important to fund ACP. You know, and we had one-pagers for each of their districts that showed 60, 70, 80,000 people were taking advantage of ACP on a monthly basis. And I mean, that's compelling, you know? I mean, and again, you know, our state's very similar to Arkansas. So, I mean, it's not, we have, you know, 5 red congressmen and 1 blue, okay? So it's really about knowing the audience and how to present the data. And when you show data like that, it is a compelling way to say, this is why this is important. And there's tons of people in our state that are taking advantage of this on an ongoing basis. So I think that was really one of the things that the partnerships we've had locally, you know, we always, you know, every time we would go to some of our little roundtables or go throughout our state, we'd mention ACP. You know, we tell people, look, it's really easy to go sign up. We would direct, you know, stakeholders, nonprofits, or local municipalities who wanted to get the word out and say, look, go to the FCC's website. They got great resources that you can use to publicize this. You know, they have social media posts. They have pages that you can print out. Put them, you know, at your clerk of court. Put them, you know, in the DMV or what have you, just to show people that this was key. So I think as we move into, you know, I think everybody's goal right now is to make sure that it's re-upped and that the funding continues to materialize for ACP. But we are continuing to, you know, go through different ideas on how to continue to boost the numbers and make sure that we're not just covering the 50, 600,000 people that are participating in it each month, but we get up to our 950K threshold of the people that we feel are eligible throughout our state. So that's one of the key ways we've been, you know, working through that issue.
Najia Kaldi-Korabi from Alexandria, Virginia Computer Corps. I have 2 questions. The first question is reaching out people to teach them in person, because a lot of these people don't know how to use the digital literacy, you know, because they don't know even how to open a computer. So it's very challenging for all of us to help these people. We're trying very hard to reach out. And we even conducted and traveled to different areas. Even though we're in Alexandria, we are traveling all the way to Reston just to help these people because my concern is that we have the funds to save them on the ACP part, but we're not thinking about also how to teach them how to use the system. And this is so important because they go together. That's number one. And my second question is, so with the ACP reaching out and saving them money, I have we're serving the low-income community. So most of our students or the ones who apply for the program are from the low-income community. And we noticed that they are still paying even though they got approved for the ACP. And they're paying like $10, some of them $50. And I'm not sure why they're still paying even though they got approved.
I think for the context of this panel, one of the things I'm thinking about is that's a fantastic bit to take to a funder, particularly when we think about, we've got ACP. What is the other ways that we can package funding around that to amplify that return on investment for our community? And so that's one of the ways that we've leveraged some of our investment, just putting on, not that I ever was, but just, on the internet, it made me an investor reading about it, right? Nobody likes to be the first money in. They like to add on. They like to pour the gas on the fire that you've already started in Alexandria in a positive way that's warming the lives of the community. And so I think setting that story up is critical in the way that you might go after funding to support the specific thing that you need. Yes, we have ACP, but to really make it effective, we need this. And with your contribution, your organization can go do that and prove to them that you can. That would be a suggestion I get in the 30 seconds that I have to reply to you today.
An example of that, about a year ago before I joined on, Heartland was, as it was going out, was hearing conversations around telehealth and in the waning days of the pandemic around, everybody was understanding the value of telehealth, but in many communities, there was still a lack of comfort and understanding of how to actually leverage telehealth by many individuals. So we actually partnered, we're able to secure funding, and we're going to release a digital skills module through the American Library Association in Q1 of 24, specifically tailored to English and Spanish speaking audiences on how to utilize telehealth modules. To Bruce's point, if you've got a problem, I guarantee you there is a funder out there that is going to be willing to support and meet the need of a well-tailored out plan.
Hi, Tiffany. So I had a question more about, geographically speaking, the areas that you've all worked in have some areas where it's very highly concentrated city life, but then the further you go out, the more it's rural. How has that influenced the work you've done in terms of addressing the needs that all your constituents have and people throughout the state, while still knowing that there's a different approach depending on where they are geographically?
So one of the things I tell folks, there are the same challenges you find in rural America, you find in urban America. They just tend to be more pronounced in rural America. And oftentimes they become more pronounced because you don't have as big of a social safety net and wraparound services to fill the gap. You don't have as large of a community of care to step in and meet those same needs. But you still have kids that when they leave school on a Friday with their Chromebook, they still don't know how they're going to get their homework done before Monday morning because they don't have internet at home, and they've got to figure out how to use the one hotspot on mom's cell phone, and there are 3 kids. You've still got the same issue of a little old lady who's trying to figure out how to make her telehealth visit, regardless of if it's downtown Chicago or Southern Illinois. It's the same challenges, it's just a different zip code.
Last words?
I think this is one of the key points of why digital navigation services are so important. I have specific opinions about how they should be developed, which I'm happy to share after, but I think that digital navigation services, when done right, provide basically a live view of what's happening in your community. I can open my phone, you can come sit at my computer, and I can tell you right now the requests that are coming in from residents across Mecklenburg County. And so as we think about expanding that to the surrounding counties, that's really the basis of this work, is how do we know, how are we listening to residents? And digital navigation services, as we've heard from some of the digital navigators that are here in the room with us, become the place where we can actually infuse the voice of the residents and understand that complex question across urban and rural geographies, and probably land at the place you just said, which is that there's this unifying point, and we can begin to see those, and then we can begin to think about how we deploy resources appropriately. So I'm in Mecklenburg County, but a rural county right next to me is only a 30-minute drive, not 7,000 square miles. Right. But we can be there in 15 minutes, and that's a growth opportunity for us. So as we think about how do we support this work as a community and people who care about each other, that's one of the ways that we're leveraging that data to be able to see that picture.
It's going to be an interesting kind of thought experiment to go through as every state goes through this process over the next year, 18 months or so, to replicate stuff that you're doing across the country. You know, I've been so ingrained in thinking about just access, just because we want to get approved first and get the money going and rolling and everything, that you do have, like, from my perspective, an unserved location is the same whether it's rural or urban. It still needs funding. Now, from an ISP's perspective, it's going to cost more to do, it could cost more to do rural, you know, it may, you know, whatever. But that's what I think, you know, that's the first step. It's like, okay, everybody needs it. We have to close the gap there. But then you start to think about these cool ideas and say that, like, what's happening in North Carolina, to say, how can we replicate that, you know, from county to county, maybe, you know, to a few states around us, and then take it national, you know, and have representatives that do that across the country and participate in this, and really, you know, again, try to push forward and say, this is, you know, this is what we're doing, it worked, you should replicate it in other areas.
Well, it also gives people an opportunity to have a seat at the table. So you're looking at the data and you're giving people the opportunity to have agency and have a seat at the table, which I think is important.
What do you see as the role of state digital equity leaders in advocating for BEAD non-deployment funds to be used for digital equity activities? And then another one, how do we make the public funding a force multiplier for other investments?
Sure.
We choose you.
So the main issue is how allocations from the BEAD funds were done, okay? Now, I'm not going to sit up here and complain about it, because Louisiana has enough funding to go and solve the problem and then have some left over possibly. But there's a lot of states out there who are not in a similar situation, where they don't feel that they'd have enough money to do fiber to every location, or a combination of fiber and fixed wireless to every location, where they won't have money left over for non-deployment uses. The way that we and some other states like Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, maybe perhaps North Carolina to some extent, look at non-deployment is that it really is, it marries together very well with our digital equity planning, because we really want to take the investment that the extra excess funding, and take that investment and double down on digital equity, digital inclusion efforts that we've outlined in our plan. So I think that's a key thing to think about. But for a state that's not, that feels that they don't have enough money, they have to come to the table to NTIA and say, this is our plan to connect everyone, okay? They could come up with an idea that says, okay, we want to put, you know, $30 million into workforce funding because we know that it will be able to connect our people that much faster. You know, we'll get the job done in 2 years instead of 10. And that's a key consideration. It's like, do you want to try to get the best, most resilient technology in place to everybody? Or can you take a step back and investigate how a plan could fit into the box that our federal partners have for this? So I think there's a lot of different interesting ways that states can approach this. And what's really cool about this is that there's 56 different states and territories that are working on this at the same time. So they can take good ideas that might work in our state and say, well, we're going to tweak it a little bit and we're going to put it in place for our state, Arkansas, or we're going to put it in our place in place in Mississippi, or whatever. And I think that's really what makes this so interesting, you know, is the collaborative environment that you see across the states, and how they take plans, tweak them, come up with their own special sauce that works for their state, and then, you know, go through and implement them.
And I think, to use Thomas's phrase from earlier in the panel about over communication, I think that's the key to taking these dollars as a force multiplier, is over communicating, bringing your state chambers, bringing your municipal leagues, your county commissioner associations, whatever relevant trade associations are in place in your states, to the table and say, our dollars are going to get us here. We need to get here. This is the gap. What are the conversations that need to happen to get us here? These are the conversations that need to take place in order to get us here.
Thank you. So please join me in thanking our panelists, Thomas, Solomon, and Bruce. Thank you.